The morning bell rang softly across the school courtyard as students hurried inside, chatting, laughing, and filling the air with noise. In the middle of all that, a quiet girl walked slowly toward her classroom. She moved with small, careful steps, clutching her notebook to her chest. Her shoes were clean but worn out, and her bag looked a little older than the rest. She didn't talk to anyone, though she passed by many familiar faces. Everyone knew who she was, but no one really knew her. She sat at the last bench near the window, the same seat she chose every day. The light from outside fell gently on her desk where she opened her notebook. She liked that spot because it was peaceful. From there, she could see the trees outside and listen to the faint sound of birds when the class got quiet. She never tried to draw attention, not because she was afraid, but because she didn't see the need to. She believed that silence was enough. The teacher entered the room and the noise stopped. The other students straightened up, hiding their half-finished jokes. The teacher started the lesson on mathematics, something that usually made half the class sigh in frustration. But the quiet girl's eyes followed every step of the problem on the board. She didn't just copy, she understood. Sometimes she would smile slightly when she saw a pattern or a number fall perfectly into place, but no one noticed. They were too busy talking about what they would do after school, or who got the highest marks in the last test. She didn't mind. For her, understanding things was more satisfying than being praised for them. After class, a group of students gathered near her desk. They were laughing about a funny video someone showed on their phone. She smiled quietly, but they didn't look at her. One of them accidentally dropped a pencil near her desk. She picked it up, handed it back, and said softly, "Here." The student just said thanks and walked away. Small moments like that happened every day. People saw her, but they didn't really see her. During lunch break, she would sit under the big mango tree near the back of the school. It was her favorite spot. She would open her lunchbox, usually simple food packed by her mother, and eat slowly while reading a small old book. Sometimes she would write notes on little pieces of paper, strange equations, word puzzles, and numbers that looked random to anyone else. But to her, they meant something. She loved figuring things out. It gave her peace. At home, her world wasn't much louder. Her parents were kind but busy. Her mother worked long hours sewing clothes, and her father worked in a nearby shop. They didn't have much, but they had each other. She never asked for new things or complained when her school supplies ran low. She made do with what she had. In the evenings, after dinner, she would sit near the small table in the corner of the room with her books open. The house would be quiet except for the ticking clock and her father's old radio. She liked that quiet. It helped her think. Sometimes she would stare at a question for hours trying to understand it, not because anyone told her to, but because she wanted to know why. That word, why, always stayed in her mind. Why did things work the way they did? Why did people give up when something looked hard? Why was silence seen as weakness? At school, she never spoke much. When teachers asked questions, she knew most of the answers but didn't raise her hand. Not because she didn't want to speak, but because she didn't like the attention. She felt nervous when too many eyes turned toward her. She preferred to listen, observe, and learn quietly. Some students misunderstood her silence. They thought she was strange or too shy. A few even joked about how she never talked, but she never reacted. She believed people spoke from what they understood, and maybe they didn't understand her yet. Her classmates had different dreams. Some wanted to be doctors, others engineers, a few didn't know yet. But she didn't think that far ahead. All she wanted was to learn as much as she could. She believed that knowledge was the one thing no one could take away. There was one subject that fascinated her more than anything: logic puzzles. She loved problems that others gave up on. The harder they looked, the more she wanted to solve them. Her old notebooks were full of such puzzles, some from books, others she made herself. She didn't need fancy tools, just her mind and a bit of patience. Once, during a class test, the teacher gave an extra question at the end, a tricky one, meant to challenge the best students. Everyone groaned when they saw it, but she quietly began writing, her pencil moving with confidence. When the results came, no one was surprised that the top students got high marks. But what did surprise everyone was when the teacher paused, looked at her paper, and said, "Interesting." He didn't say more, but that one word made her heart race. She had gotten the hard question right. Still, no one really talked about it. The others didn't even know. She was used to that. She didn't want fame or recognition. She just wanted to keep learning. Days turned into weeks, and the school life moved on. There were games, tests, group projects, and festivals. She joined when she was asked, but always stayed on the side, helping quietly, smiling when thanked. She didn't stand out, but she was always there, like a calm presence no one noticed but everyone somehow relied on. Sometimes, when a friend was struggling with homework, she would help quietly. She never showed off or made them feel small. She just explained it in a way that made sense, simple and kind. The ones she helped always felt thankful, even if they forgot to say it. There was something gentle in the way she lived her days, a rhythm that didn't need attention or noise. Yet beneath that calmness, her mind was always moving, always searching for patterns in the world around her. Then came a day that would change everything. It started like any other morning. The students were restless, the air warm with excitement. The principal had announced during assembly that there would be a special challenge coming soon, something the whole school could participate in. No one knew what it was yet, but the way teachers smiled hinted that it would be something big. The students whispered about it all through the day. Some said it would be a sports event. Others thought it might be a quiz. She listened quietly but didn't think much of it. She had heard of such events before. They were usually fun, but not really for people like her who preferred quiet corners and books. That evening, as she walked home, the sunset painted the sky orange and gold. She liked watching the colors change. It reminded her that everything, even ordinary days, could hold beauty if you paid attention. She reached home, helped her mother with dinner, and then sat down to study. But her mind kept returning to the talk about that new challenge. She wondered what kind of puzzle it would be. The next day, the principal announced it officially. It wasn't a sports event. It wasn't even a quiz. It was a problem. A single, complicated logic question that had stumped the teachers. It was open to everyone. Whoever solved it would win a prize and, more importantly, recognition from the entire school. The classroom buzzed with excitement. Everyone wanted to try. The smart students looked confident. The teachers encouraged them all to give it a shot. The quiet girl sat still, listening carefully. She didn't say a word, but deep inside something stirred. It wasn't about the prize. It was about the challenge itself. She wanted to see if she could understand it, if she could find what everyone else had missed. When she got home that day, she couldn't stop thinking about the problem. Her curiosity, the same quiet flame that had guided her for years, began to burn brighter. She didn't know it yet, but that one question would soon change how everyone saw her. It would be the moment when silence would finally speak louder than all the noise around her. The next morning, the whole school buzzed with excitement. Everyone was talking about the new challenge. The notice board outside the principal's office had a large sheet of paper pinned on it, neatly printed with a strange-looking question. Students crowded around it, some taking photos, others trying to make sense of it. It wasn't like a normal math problem. It was a puzzle, a mix of numbers, logic, and reasoning that needed real thinking, not just formulas. Even teachers were standing nearby, smiling as they watched students guess the answer. Some tried solving it right there, arguing over what it meant, their voices full of energy. But after a while, most of them gave up, shaking their heads. It wasn't easy. The principal had said that even he couldn't solve it, and that made it more interesting. The quiet girl stood a little away from the crowd. She read the problem once, then again. Her eyes moved slowly over each line, taking in every word. It looked tough, but not impossible. There was something hidden in it, a small trick, a pattern. She could feel it, but she didn't say a word. She just memorized it quietly and walked back to her class. As the days passed, the challenge became the talk of the entire school. Some students formed groups to work together. Others joked about how they'd already solved it, though they hadn't even tried. The teachers encouraged everyone to take part, reminding them that the winner would be recognized at a special assembly. The quiet girl didn't tell anyone she was working on it. Each day after finishing her homework, she sat at her small table, a dim light shining on her notebook. Her parents thought she was studying for exams. They didn't ask much and they trusted her. She wrote the puzzle down carefully, breaking it into small pieces. Sometimes she would stare at it for an hour, thinking silently. When she got stuck, she would take a deep breath and start again. It wasn't easy. The puzzle was full of traps, numbers that led nowhere and clues that seemed meaningless. But she kept going. She tried different ways, drawing, listing, even using colored pencils to mark patterns. She didn't give up, Not because she wanted a prize, but because something inside her refused to stop until she understood it. At school, the excitement was beginning to fade. The students who had first rushed to solve the problem started losing interest. They realized it wasn't as simple as they thought. Some even said it was unsolvable. The teachers smiled but said nothing. The principal hinted that the answer did exist and that someone, somewhere, might find it if they looked at it differently. The quiet girl listened carefully when he said that. Look at it differently. Those words stayed in her head all day. That night she opened her notebook again and started from the beginning. She thought about what the principal said and tried to see the problem from another side. Suddenly a small detail caught her eye. A line that didn't make sense before now fit perfectly. Her heart beat faster. She scribbled quickly, testing her thought, crossing it out and writing again. By midnight, her table was full of crumpled papers. But she didn't stop. Her eyes were tired, but her mind was sharper than ever. She felt close, very close. The next morning, she woke up early and checked her notes again. The solution was almost there, like a picture hidden under fog. She just needed one more step to make it clear. At school, no one noticed the quiet excitement inside her. To them, she was still the same, the silent girl at the last bench. But now, her heart carried a small spark that wouldn't go away. During recess, some of her classmates were still joking about the puzzle. One of them said, "Even the teachers gave up. I think it's just impossible." Another laughed. Maybe someone from another school could solve it, but not here. They didn't mean harm, but their words lingered. The quiet girl didn't react. She just kept that thought inside, not as anger, but as motivation. That evening, while her mother cooked dinner, she sat quietly near the window, her notebook open. The soft smell of food filled the air, but she barely noticed. Her mind was running through the problem again and again. Suddenly, she paused. A line she had ignored earlier now seemed important. She picked up her pencil, her hand trembling slightly, and began writing fast. Numbers started connecting like pieces of a puzzle coming together, and then there it was. The answer. Simple, clear. So obvious now that she couldn't believe she hadn't seen it before. She stared at it, smiling quietly. Her heart raced, but she didn't shout or jump. That wasn't her way. Instead, she sat still for a while, just looking at what she had done. She didn't rush to show anyone. She wanted to make sure. The next day, she rechecked her work before school. Every step made sense. Every line connected perfectly. She knew it was right, but how could she tell them? The thought of standing in front of everyone made her nervous. She wasn't used to attention. At school, the principal announced during assembly that the puzzle would soon be discussed in the auditorium. He invited anyone who wanted to present their answer to come forward. The announcement made everyone excited again. Some students started trying once more, hoping to be the one who solved it first, but she stayed quiet. She wasn't sure if she had the courage to stand there in front of the whole school. Still, deep inside, something whispered that maybe this was her moment. Maybe silence had lasted long enough. For the next few days, she kept thinking about it. She imagined herself standing on the stage, her hands shaking, her voice small. But she also imagined what it would feel like to finally be heard. Not because she shouted, but because her mind spoke for her. When the day finally came, the entire school gathered in the auditorium. The teachers sat on one side, the students on the other. The principal stood at the front with a microphone. The challenge problem was written on a large whiteboard for everyone to see. He looked around the room and asked, "Does anyone have the answer?" The silence that followed was heavy. A few hands went up, students who wanted to try. They walked to the front, shared their ideas, and the principal listened patiently. But none of them were correct. Each time someone made a mistake, a soft murmur filled the hall. The quiet girl sat near the middle row, her notebook resting on her lap. Her hands were cold, her heart racing. She knew the right answer. She had checked it many times. But could she do it? Could she stand in front of everyone? The principal asked again. Anyone else? The room was silent. Some students had already started whispering. Maybe no one can solve it, someone said. It's impossible. Her fingers tightened around her notebook. For a moment she looked down, unsure. Then she remembered all those nights she stayed up trying, all the times she was overlooked, all the moments she stayed quiet when she knew the answer. Something in her changed. She stood up. The sound of her chair scraping against the floor made people turn. The students near her stopped talking. The teachers looked surprised. The principal's eyes softened. "Yes?" he asked gently. She nodded once and walked slowly toward the front. The room was so quiet she could hear her own heartbeat. Her steps echoed on the wooden floor. Every eye in the auditorium followed her, some curious, some doubtful. When she reached the stage, she stood for a second, looking at the board. The principal handed her a marker. She held it carefully, her hand slightly shaking. Then she looked at the problem and smiled faintly. She knew what to do, but she didn't start writing yet. She took a deep breath and closed her eyes for a second, as if gathering all the courage she had kept hidden for years. The hall was silent. No one moved, and in that stillness something powerful was about to happen. Something that would make everyone in that room see her, maybe for the first time in their lives. She stood in front of the large whiteboard, the marker still in her hand. The air inside the auditorium felt thick with silence. Hundreds of students stared at her, unsure of what to expect. Some whispered softly, wondering if she really knew what she was doing. A few of them even smiled, thinking maybe she was being brave but would get it wrong like everyone else. But she didn't look nervous now. Her eyes were calm, her breathing steady. For the first time, she didn't care about who was watching. She only cared about the puzzle, the same one she had spent countless nights trying to solve. The principal stood a few steps behind her, quietly observing. The teachers near the front row exchanged curious glances. None of them had ever seen her volunteer for anything before. She looked at the problem written on the board, lines of numbers, patterns, and words that had confused the whole school. For a moment, she just stared at it. Then slowly, she began to write. The sound of the marker on the board echoed softly through the room. She started by writing a few symbols, then circled certain parts of the question. Her handwriting was small and neat. Every move seemed thoughtful. She wasn't guessing. She knew what she was doing. The students leaned forward, whispering to each other. "What is she writing?" one said. "I think she's just repeating what others did," another replied. But after a few minutes, those whispers faded. Something about the way she worked made everyone go quiet again. She didn't pause or hesitate. Her steps were confident, like she could already see the answer forming in her mind. As she worked, she mumbled softly to herself, almost as if explaining the logic in her head. Her voice was low, but the teachers near her could hear pieces of it. Her explanation made sense. It wasn't rushed or confusing. It was clear, precise, and simple. The principal's eyes widened slightly as he followed her steps. He leaned toward one of the teachers and whispered, "She's on the right track." The teacher nodded slowly, impressed. After a few more minutes, she stopped writing. Her hand lowered and she stepped back. The whiteboard was filled with neat lines of logic and calculations that made perfect sense. At the bottom, a single number circled in bold stood as her final answer. The room remained completely still. Everyone looked at the board, then at her. She didn't say anything. She just turned slightly toward the principal and handed him the marker. Her expression was calm, but her heart was beating fast. She didn't know how they would react. The principal walked closer to the board, reading her solution carefully from the start. His eyes moved slowly, tracing every step she had written. He reached the bottom and stared at the final answer. Then he read through it again, double-checking. When he finally turned around, there was a quiet, surprised smile on his face. "This," he said softly, his voice carrying across the room, "is correct." For a moment, no one moved. Then the silence broke into a wave of whispers. "What did he say? She got it right? That can't be true." The noise grew louder until the principal raised his hand to quiet everyone. "Yes," he said again, this time louder. "She solved it. And she did it perfectly." The entire auditorium fell silent again, but this time it wasn't out of disbelief. It was out of amazement. For a long second, everyone just stared at the quiet girl standing near the board. The girl who never raised her hand in class. The one who always sat alone. The one most people overlooked. And then slowly one student stood up and started clapping. Then another. And another. Within moments, the sound of applause filled the room like a wave crashing against the walls. Students stood on their feet, clapping, cheering, smiling. Even the teachers joined in. The noise was so loud it echoed down the corridors. She didn't know what to do. She wasn't used to this kind of attention. Her cheeks turned pink and she looked down for a moment, shy but happy. The principal smiled and gestured for her to stay where she was. He spoke into the microphone again. This young lady, he said proudly, just did what no one else could. This problem was given to every teacher, every senior student, and even some of our best alumni, and no one solved it. Until today, the crowd clapped even louder. Some students shouted her name, others just smiled in disbelief. The ones who had once ignored her now looked at her with respect. She felt overwhelmed, but in a good way. She had never wanted fame or recognition, yet this moment felt special, not because everyone was watching, but because she had proved something to herself. After the applause settled a bit, the principal asked her, "Would you like to tell us how you figured it out?" She hesitated for a second, but then nodded. She turned back to the board and pointed at the first line. Her voice trembled at first, but as she started explaining, her confidence grew. She showed how a small detail in the question changed everything, how the numbers followed a hidden pattern most people missed. She spoke clearly, slowly, making sure everyone could understand. The more she explained, the more impressed the teachers looked. When she finished, the entire auditorium clapped again. The principal placed his hand on her shoulder and said, "You've not only solved the problem, you've reminded us that brilliance can be found in silence." Her eyes shimmered slightly, not with tears, but with quiet pride. She had never heard words like that directed at her before. For once, she wasn't invisible. As she walked back to her seat, students smiled at her, some whispering, "That was amazing," as she passed. She gave small, shy smiles in return. When she sat down, her hands were still trembling, but her heart felt lighter than it ever had. After the assembly ended, the crowd followed her out of the hall. Some students asked her questions about how she solved it. Others simply wanted to congratulate her. She answered softly, never boasting, never making it about herself. She said, "I just kept trying. That's all." One of her classmates looked at her with wide eyes and said, "I didn't even know you liked solving puzzles." She smiled and replied, "I just like figuring out how things work." It was a simple answer, but it said everything. That day, she didn't sit alone during lunch. A few students joined her under the mango tree, asking her about puzzles and logic games. She laughed quietly, feeling strange but happy. The wall she had built around herself slowly began to open. The teachers spoke about her in the staff room, amazed by her work. Some said they would recommend her for a national competition. The principal decided her name would be placed on the school's honor board. But when he told her, she simply smiled and said, "Thank you, but I just wanted to see if I could solve it." Her humility made everyone admire her even more. When she went home that evening, the world looked different. The same streets, the same houses, but everything felt brighter. Her parents noticed her smile as soon as she walked in. Her mother asked, "Something good happened at school?" She nodded, unable to hide her joy. "Yes, something good," she said softly. That night, when she sat by her study table, she opened her notebook again. The puzzle she had solved was written on one page, and beside it, she wrote a small note to herself. "Don't be afraid to be seen when it's time." For so long, she had believed that silence was her comfort. And it was, but that day she learned that sometimes even silence can speak. Sometimes it speaks louder than all the noise in the world. The next morning at school, people greeted her differently. The same students who once passed her without noticing now smiled and said hello. Some even asked her to teach them how to solve problems like that. She didn't see herself as special, but she realized something important. Being quiet didn't mean being invisible. As the days went by, her confidence grew, not in loud ways, but in small, meaningful moments. She began to answer questions in class, help others more openly, and even joined a small study group. The teachers often pointed to her as an example of patience and hard work, but deep down she remained the same gentle, thoughtful person she had always been. Her voice was still soft, her steps still quiet, but now people listened when she spoke. She had no idea that this was only the beginning, that this one moment of courage would open doors she never knew existed. But for now, she was just happy knowing she had faced her fear, stood in front of everyone, and let her silence turn into strength. And that was enough. After that unforgettable day, things slowly began to change around her. The next morning when she entered the school gate, the usual noise of chatter and laughter still filled the air. But this time, something was different. Students turned to look at her, not in mockery or confusion like before, but in quiet admiration. Some smiled, some waved, and some just looked at her with genuine curiosity. She wasn't used to this kind of attention. It felt strange at first, almost overwhelming. For years she had walked through these same gates invisible, blending into the background like a shadow no one noticed. Now suddenly everyone saw her. She smiled softly, gave a small nod, and kept walking toward her classroom. Inside, a few classmates had already arrived. They greeted her with excitement, asking questions about how she solved the problem. "How did you even think of that pattern?" one boy asked. "It looked impossible," another added. She answered in her quiet way, explaining that she had simply kept trying different angles until something clicked. There was no arrogance in her tone, no prideful show. She spoke with calm humility, the same way she always did. "I just didn't stop thinking about it," she said with a small smile. Throughout the day, teachers dropped by to congratulate her. Some even mentioned her in other classes, using her story as an example of persistence. Her name spread across the school, and even students from higher grades came to meet her. She handled it all gracefully, but deep inside she remained the same, grounded, humble, and quietly proud of her hard work. That week, the principal called her to his office. She walked in nervously, her hands clasped together. He smiled warmly and said, "You've made the entire school proud. We didn't expect anyone to solve that question so quickly and with such clarity." She thanked him softly, unsure what else to say. He continued, "I'd like you to represent our school in the upcoming inter-school academic competition next month. It's a big event. I believe you'd do very well." Her heart raced. She had never represented her school in anything before. The thought of standing in front of other schools made her nervous, but she didn't want to let him down. "I'll try my best," she said. He nodded. "That's all I ask. Just be yourself." When she left his office, she felt both nervous and excited. She wasn't used to being chosen for something important, but she wanted to prove that what happened on that stage wasn't luck. It was effort, dedication, and quiet belief. In the following days, she spent extra hours in the library. The librarian, an elderly woman with kind eyes, noticed her coming more often and helped her find advanced books on puzzles, reasoning, and mathematics. She would sit in a quiet corner, reading, solving, and making notes. The sun would set outside the window, but she often didn't notice until the lights flickered on. Sometimes her classmates joined her. A few who had once teased her now came asking for help with their studies. She helped them patiently, never showing frustration. She explained things in a way that made sense step by step, until their faces lit up with understanding. Watching them learn made her happy. For her, knowledge was something to share, not to keep hidden. Her teachers also began giving her extra materials to challenge her further. One teacher, impressed by her dedication, said, "You remind me of why I became a teacher, to see students discover their own strength." Those words stayed with her. At home, her parents were proud, but quietly so. They didn't fully understand the details of her achievement, but they saw the happiness in her eyes. Her father came home one evening holding a small chocolate bar, saying with a smile, "A gift for our genius." She laughed softly, embarrassed, but touched. It wasn't about gifts. It was the warmth behind them that mattered. As the inter-school competition drew closer, she practiced more. The school arranged a small study group for her, and a few teachers guided her through mock questions. Though she still felt nervous about the upcoming event, she no longer doubted herself. That day in the auditorium had changed something deep inside her. It had shown her that her voice, even if quiet, mattered. The day of the competition arrived sooner than she expected. She wore her neatly pressed uniform, her shoes shining, her hair tied back simply. The school van waited at the gate, filled with students from different grades. They wished her luck as she climbed in. The principal gave her an encouraging smile before she left, saying, "Just remember, you already made us proud." The event was held in a large hall filled with students from many schools. Each participant sat at a separate table, the atmosphere thick with tension. Questions were projected on a big screen and everyone worked in silence. The problems were difficult, far harder than what she had faced before. But she stayed calm. She reminded herself that every problem had a pattern. Every question had an answer if you just looked deep enough. Minutes turned into hours. Some students grew restless, some gave up halfway, but she kept going, her focus steady. She didn't think about the crowd, the competition, or the prize. All she cared about was understanding each problem, one at a time. When the results were announced, her school's name echoed through the hall. She had come first. The applause that followed felt different this time, bigger, louder, and full of pride. Her teachers hugged her. Her classmates cheered, and even students from other schools congratulated her. For a moment, she just stood there, smiling quietly, trying to take it all in. She didn't cry or jump with excitement. She simply felt peaceful, like the world had opened up a little more for her. When she returned to school the next day, the principal announced her victory during assembly. The same hall where she once stood trembling now roared with applause again. She looked around and saw hundreds of smiling faces, but this time, she didn't feel small or out of place. She felt seen. After the assembly, some younger students came to her, their eyes wide with admiration. One little girl said shyly, "I want to be like you someday." Those words touched her deeply. She bent down and replied gently, "You already can. Just keep believing in yourself." In the following weeks, she started helping more students with their studies. The principal gave her permission to start a small problem-solving club after school hours. At first, only a few students joined, but soon the group grew. They met twice a week under the big mango tree, the same place she once sat alone. Now laughter and discussion filled the air there. She didn't act like a teacher. She listened, guided, and encouraged. The club became more than just a study group. It became a space where students felt comfortable being curious, asking questions, and helping one another. Her story began to spread beyond the school. Local newspapers wrote short articles about her, describing how a quiet student had amazed everyone with her intelligence and calm strength. A few people from the community visited her home to congratulate her parents. Her mother smiled proudly each time, saying, "She's always been like this, quiet but determined." Despite all the attention, she stayed humble. Fame didn't interest her. What made her happiest was seeing others grow confident in themselves. One afternoon, while she was leaving school, she overheard two students talking. One said, "Remember when no one noticed her? Now everyone looks up to her." The other replied, "Yeah, it's like she didn't change when we just started seeing her properly." Those words made her pause. They were true. She hadn't changed who she was, she had only been given a chance to show it. And maybe that was all people needed sometimes. A moment, a chance, a spark of recognition. That evening, as she walked home with her notebook in hand, the sunset painted the sky in soft pink and orange. She smiled quietly, thinking about everything that had happened. Her journey had begun with silence, but now it was filled with meaning. And though she didn't know what the future held, she carried with her a new kind of confidence, gentle but unshakable. The kind that came not from applause or trophies, but from knowing that even the quietest voice can change how others see the world. As time passed, her days at school started to feel different. What once felt like long, silent hours now felt full of purpose. Students who used to walk past her without noticing would now stop and talk. Some asked for advice. Others just wanted to sit near her during lunch. Even though she was still the same quiet person, something about her presence made people feel calm. She didn't change how she spoke or acted. She still preferred sitting near the window, still enjoyed spending time in the library, and still walked home alone in the evenings. But people now understood her better. They no longer saw her silence as weakness. They saw it as strength. The problem-solving club she had started became one of the most popular groups in school. Every afternoon, students from different grades gathered under the mango tree, notebooks in hand, excited to learn something new. She guided them patiently, showing them how to think through a problem instead of memorizing answers. Her approach was simple. She taught them to be curious, not afraid. "It's okay to get things wrong," she often said softly. "That's how you learn." Those words stuck with her classmates more than she realized. They began to see studying not as something stressful, but as something to explore. One day, the principal came to watch one of their sessions. He stood quietly at a distance, observing how the students discussed ideas and helped one another. Later, he approached her and said, "You've built something very special here. You've changed how people learn." She smiled shyly. "I just wanted to make learning less scary," she replied. The principal nodded. "You've done more than that. You've given others confidence." After that conversation, the school decided to make her club an official after-school program. They even named it after her idea, HOA the Curious Minds Club. It made her proud, but also a little emotional. She never imagined that her love for learning, which once made her feel alone, would one day bring so many people together. Months turned into years. She continued studying with the same quiet dedication. Her grades remained excellent, but she never bragged. She helped anyone who needed it, even students who once mocked her in the past. When they came to her for help, she never turned them away. Forgiveness came easily to her because she understood what it felt like to be misunderstood. In her final year, she was chosen to give a short speech at the graduation ceremony. The thought of speaking in front of hundreds of people made her heart race, but she wanted to do it. She knew it wasn't about being perfect. It was about sharing her truth. The day of graduation arrived with bright skies and cheerful faces. Students lined up in their uniforms, taking pictures and laughing together. When it was her turn to walk on stage, the entire hall fell silent again. Just like that day long ago when she had solved the impossible question. She took a deep breath and looked around. The same stage, the same crowd, but this time she wasn't trembling. She began speaking softly but clearly. When I first came to this school, I was quiet. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I didn't know if anyone would listen. I used to think that being quiet meant being invisible. But I've learned that sometimes silence can speak louder than noise. She paused, letting her words settle in. The audience listened closely. That day, when I solved the question on stage, it wasn't just about answering correctly. It was about believing that I could. It taught me that we all have something special inside us. We just need a moment to show it. And when that moment comes, don't let fear stop you. Her voice trembled slightly at the end, but her message was clear. The hall erupted in applause. Some teachers wiped away tears. Students cheered and stood up once again, just like before. It wasn't because she had done something impossible this time, but because she had reminded them of something important, that everyone, no matter how quiet, has a light that deserves to be seen. After graduation, she received a scholarship to a well-known university. The entire school celebrated her achievement. Her teachers gave her farewell gifts, and her classmates wrote her letters saying how much she had inspired them. One of her teachers told her, "You didn't just solve a question that day. You solved how people see silence." Leaving her school behind was emotional. She took one last walk through the empty halls, touched the classroom door where it all began, and smiled. She whispered a soft thank you under her breath, to her teachers, her classmates, and even to that one test question that changed everything. At university, she faced new challenges. The environment was larger, the competition tougher, but she carried the same calm confidence with her. She joined study groups, helped others when they struggled, and stayed curious. Slowly, her professors began to notice her as well. One of them once said, "You have a rare way of thinking, patient and precise." She didn't seek attention, but her quiet nature and thoughtful ideas made people listen when she spoke. She often thought back to her school days, the noise of the crowd, the applause, and that single moment that changed her path. It reminded her that great things don't always start loud. Sometimes they begin in silence. Years later, after finishing her degree, she returned to her old school as a guest speaker. The students had changed, but the mango tree and the old stage were still there. When she stepped onto the stage, the teachers and students stood to welcome her, a tradition that had started the day she solved that impossible question. Looking at all those young faces, she felt a wave of nostalgia. The principal, now older, greeted her warmly. "It's good to see you again," he said. "It feels like coming home," she replied. When she spoke to the students, she told them about her journey, how she used to sit quietly, afraid to speak up, and how one day everything changed because she dared to try. She told them that success isn't about being the loudest in the room, but about believing in your own voice even when no one else hears it yet. After her speech, a small group of students came up to her. One boy said, "Sometimes people make fun of me because I don't talk much. But after hearing you, I think maybe that's okay." She smiled and replied, "It's more than okay. Quiet people notice things others miss. Never stop observing. One day your moment will come too." That day, as she walked past the mango tree again, she saw a group of students sitting under it, just like before, solving problems together, laughing, and learning. Her heart swelled with pride. The roots she had planted years ago were still growing strong. When she finally left the school gate, she looked back one last time. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the ground. and she smiled softly. That place had given her everything, not just knowledge, but courage, friendship, and a belief in herself. She realized that sometimes a single moment can change the direction of a life. But what truly matters is what you do after that moment, how you carry it forward, how you use it to help others. From that day on, she continued her journey, studying, teaching, and inspiring others in quiet, powerful ways. People remembered her not just as the girl who solved the impossible question, but as the one who taught everyone that silence, too, has a voice. And whenever someone asked her how she found the courage to stand up that day, she would smile and say, "It wasn't courage. It was just a decision to stop doubting myself. Once you stop doubting, the rest becomes easy." Her story spread far beyond her school. It became something people shared when they wanted to remind others not to give up, not to underestimate themselves, and not to judge someone by how loudly they speak. Because sometimes, it's the quietest person in the room who holds the answer that changes everything. Years passed, and life kept moving forward quietly but steadily, just like her. The once shy girl who solved the impossible question had now grown into a thoughtful young woman. Her world had expanded far beyond her small school, yet she still carried the same calmness in her heart. She had graduated from university with high honors, but instead of chasing big city jobs or fame, she chose a path that surprised many. She returned to her hometown to teach. Some people didn't understand why. They told her she could have gone anywhere, done anything. But she smiled and said, "I want to be where it all began. I want to give back to the place that gave me courage." The same school she once walked through quietly as a student now welcomed her back as a teacher. The moment she stepped inside, memories flooded her mind. The laughter in the corridors, the echo of footsteps, the soft rustle of notebooks. The principal, older but still warm-hearted, met her at the door with a smile. "You kept your promise," he said. "You said you'd come back one day." She laughed softly. "I had to. This place taught me who I am." Her classroom was bright and filled with energy. The students, curious and eager, listened closely whenever she spoke. They didn't know the full story at first, only that their teacher was kind, patient, and always encouraged them to think deeply. It wasn't until one day during an assembly that the principal introduced her as the student who had once made the entire school stand and cheer. The hall erupted in applause again, and her students looked at her in awe. She smiled, slightly embarrassed, and said, "It's not about the applause. It's about never stopping your effort." Over time, she became one of the most loved teachers in the school. Her classes were different, not just about textbooks and formulas, but about curiosity, discipline, and self-belief. When her students struggled, she reminded them gently, "It's okay to make mistakes. What matters is that you keep trying." Her lessons went beyond academics. She taught them how to face failure with grace, how to be kind to others, and how to find peace in silence. Sometimes she would end a class by saying softly, "You don't always have to speak loudly to be heard. Let your actions make the sound." The school had changed over the years, but the big mango tree was still there. Every afternoon she sat beneath it, watching students solve problems just like she once did. The Curious Minds Club was still running, and now she was its mentor. It amazed her how things had come full circle. The same spot where she once sat as a quiet student had now become a space of laughter and learning for a new generation. One afternoon, as she helped a group of students solve a complex riddle, a boy raised his hand and said, "Ma'am, is it true that you once solved a question that no one else could?" She smiled and nodded. "Yes, that's true." The boy's eyes widened. "How did you do it?" She thought for a moment before answering. "I didn't do it because I wanted to prove something. I did it because I loved the challenge. When you enjoy learning, you stop being afraid of getting things wrong." The boy nodded thoughtfully, and she could see a spark of determination in his eyes. It reminded her of herself years ago, curious, quiet, but full of questions. Outside of school, her story had become well known in the community. People often invited her to speak at local events, asking her to share her experience. She never exaggerated or made it sound like something extraordinary. She simply told the truth, how she used to be invisible, how one chance changed everything, and how silence can be just as powerful as words. At one such event, after she finished speaking, an elderly woman came up to her with tears in her eyes. "My granddaughter is very shy," the woman said. "She doesn't talk much and people think she's not smart. But after hearing you, I think I understand her better now." Her eyes softened as she replied, "Sometimes quiet people are just waiting for the right moment to be heard. Encourage her to keep learning. She'll surprise everyone one day." Moments like that reminded her why she had chosen this path. It wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about touching lives, one person at a time, one story at a time. Years went by, and she became a mentor not only to students but also to younger teachers. She taught them the importance of patience and empathy in the classroom. "You can't teach with noise," she often said. "You teach with attention, with heart." Her journey wasn't always easy. There were times when she doubted herself, especially when the education system grew tougher or when students lost motivation. But each time she felt that way, she thought back to that one defining moment, standing in front of the crowd, solving the impossible. It reminded her of the power of persistence. One evening after school had ended, she walked past the old auditorium. The lights were dim, the seats empty, but she could still hear the faint echo of that applause in her mind. She closed her eyes and smiled, remembering how scared she had been back then, and how that fear had turned into strength. She whispered softly to herself. That one moment changed everything. The next day, one of her students, a quiet girl from grade 8, came to her after class. She looked nervous, holding a notebook tightly in her hands. "Ma'am," she said, "I think I found a way to solve this question differently." Her teacher smiled and gestured for her to explain. As the girl began to talk, her eyes lit up with excitement. She explained every step clearly, her voice trembling at first but growing stronger with each word. When she finished, the teacher nodded proudly. "That's brilliant," she said. "You've done something special." The girl looked surprised. "Really?" "Yes," she said warmly. "And do you know what's even more special? You believed in your idea enough to share it." That moment felt familiar, almost like history repeating itself. Watching the young girl's face glow with pride reminded her why she had chosen this life. It wasn't just about solving problems. It was about giving others the courage to raise their voices. In the next week's school assembly, the principal called the young girl on stage to share her solution. The audience listened, amazed at how quickly she had thought of it. And when she finished, something remarkable happened. The entire school stood up and clapped. The teacher stood in the back, her eyes filled with emotion. The same scene, the same feeling, but this time, she wasn't the one on stage. She was the one watching, smiling quietly as another young voice found its strength. After the assembly, the young girl ran up to her and said, "Ma'am." Everyone stood up. She laughed softly. "Yes, they did. And now you understand how that feels, don't you?" The girl nodded excitedly. "I was so nervous, but then I remembered what you said, that silence can be strong." The teacher placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "And you proved it today." That evening, as the sun set behind the school building, she stood by the window of her classroom, watching the last few students leave. The golden light fell across the desks and everything felt peaceful. She thought about how life had come full circle, how one quiet girl had once stood up in front of a crowd, and now another had done the same. She realized something then. True success isn't about one great moment. It's about creating more of those moments for others. It's about helping others find their voice, just like she once found hers.